Was the PlayStation Vita actually a good MP3 player? I never actually hear people talk about the Vita, even back in the day, as, hey, this was an MP3 player that I was going to be using to listen to my music. Now, the PSP was one of those handhelds that was touted with having music functions, photos, videos, and games. It was core to what the PSP was for a lot of people, especially back in 2004 when MP3 players like the iPod were rising in popularity and were kind of taking over. Now, a lot of people couldn't afford the iPods because they were a lot more expensive, so something like the PSP was perfect for a lot of people, even though they could only fit so many songs on these smaller memory cards around that time. The Vita was one of those handhelds that was told that it could do everything. I mean, Sony packed this thing to the brim with everything. Cameras on the front, the back, touchscreen, rear touch, gyroscopes, everything was packed into this thing. But you never really heard PlayStation, or Sony for that matter, actually talk about it as an MP3 player, even though it has a music app on it. So what I did is I went ahead and loaded up a bunch of music on my Vita, and I want to go ahead and kind of put it through its paces and see how it is actually as a music player. Now, of course, nowadays we use our phones for practically everything, including music. I personally don't really use my phone too much for music unless I absolutely have to, or I forgot my iPod or something else in order to listen to music. So then I'll switch on Pandora on my phone in order to be able to listen to some music. But before I get too deep into it, I would like to know from you guys down in the comments if you ever use the Vita for listening to music. Now, the way you can connect your Vita to a computer is kind of not as simple as it was for the PSP. With the PSP, it was just recognized as a USB drive or a memory card inserted to your computer. With the PlayStation Vita, you have to use something called the Content Manager, and it goes through and it says, okay, this is your music folder, here's your pictures folder, here's your videos folder. This is where we can pull music from. So it's never been a super easy drag and drop, just, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and connect it real quick to my computer, put some songs on it. You had to go through the Content Manager, make sure your music was in the correct folder, and then you had to go into the PS Vita itself to manage that stuff. So they really didn't make it super easy the way we all kind of remember doing it for the PSP. Now, I know one thing that people are going to be saying is, why are you even bothering with the PlayStation Vita? It's 2025. This thing is dead. Sony no longer supports it, anything like that. Well, as you can see in my previous video talking about how the PlayStation Vita just won't die, it won't. A lot of people still really enjoy their Vitas. They're still selling very expensive on eBay. So there's definitely a market out there for them. Should you be spending over $200 on a PS Vita? Maybe not. But if you can somehow find a good deal somewhere locally or something like that, definitely get it if you don't have one. I personally like the OLED model more than the second version, even though the second version at least has a micro USB port for charging. But the original OLED Vita is the one that I prefer over both. So now that I've added some songs onto the Vita, I want to show you guys real quick just how it sounds here, just playing it through its speakers, because I mean, this thing had speakers, and we all know Sony is also a company that designs MP3 players, and they are very well known for CD products like cassette players, Walkmans, CD Walkmans, surround sound systems. They are a music company as well. So you would think that ideally they would put good speakers into the PlayStation Vita. So let's go ahead and show what that looks like and what it sounds like. Obviously, we're just going to be playing this through some, microphones, so it's not going to sound as clear as it would in person. But I also want to test out connected it to Bluetooth, because awesomely enough, the Vita did have Bluetooth where the PSP did not. So we'll see if it connects to my AirPods, and then we'll go ahead and test that out as well. So let's check it out, guys. Alright guys, so here we have the PlayStation Vita, of course, and we're going to go ahead and get right into showing the music player. So I have it stored in here with all the other stuff, and hopefully that comes through okay on the screen. As you can see here, we got the music app, and it's already going to be loaded up. And here we go. So this is the music player for the Vita. Now, I did load up some music on here, and I can only play a little bit of it, of course, to avoid any kind of copyright issues. But let's go ahead and turn the volume all the way up. And let's try and get a sample of this real quick. So I am using my microphone here as well to try and get sound for you guys. So I'm using this little Sony mic to try and pick up some of the audio. So that was some, like, you know, country style music. Let's try something that's a little bit more rock and roll. All right, and cool, I mean, you have all your little features here. Now, in terms of features, there isn't really too much that you can actually do in here. So, for example, we just have our backtrack, next track, we have repeat, shuffle, and an equalizer on here. And these are the only options for the equalizer. Heavy, pop, jazz, unique. I found that the jazz one is probably the most decent one out of all of them. But yeah, and you know, as you guys can see here, you can go by artist, albums, songs. I didn't load a lot of music, just enough to kind of give a little sample here. But yeah, if you go by artists, you can go ahead and look at them on here like this, right? So the other thing I want to check out is connecting some AirPods to the Vita and see how that sounds, if it still sounds decent. So let's check out that next. And let's go ahead and head over to settings. Let me raise that up a bit, there we go. All right, and then we're gonna head over to devices, Bluetooth devices. So we're gonna turn on Bluetooth, and let's go ahead and try pairing these. All right, so there we go. I've never actually connected them to my Vita, so it doesn't look like it might actually work. Okay, so it says they're connected, so let me go ahead and take them out, and then we're gonna head back over to music. I am getting no audio out of the headphones. Huh, okay. So it's not working. I might be doing something wrong, but I don't know why it says Find My on there. That's kind of weird. But unfortunately, it does not work with the AirPods. At least mine. All right, guys. Well, yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't get it to pair with my AirPods. Again, I could be doing something wrong, but I disconnected them, deleted them, did it all over again off camera, and still nothing. So it didn't work with that. I know they work with my Bose QC45s because I had them registered on there and that worked. So I don't know if it's just an Apple AirPods issue. I'm gonna definitely do a Google search after this and see if it's possible or anyone's even done that. But yeah, you know, if you want to use wired headphones or some other headphones that are Bluetooth, it'll probably work. I also had some Sony, like the small little Sony ones that I had that worked before as well. So there is an option for that, but if you want to use wired headphones, you can do that as well and bypass all that noise. But yeah, what do you guys think of the Vita as an MP3 player? I mean, ultimately the sound is nice, it sounds okay, but I feel like my iPhone is definitely much louder when it comes to full volume music playback. Yeah, Sony didn't really do that great on making the speakers on this thing actually good enough for that, but I don't think that was their intended purpose, honestly. I think they just added the music player as just an additional feature, like, hey, you know, there was a time where you could get Netflix on this thing and videos that you can put yourself on here. So while they had all those features available, they just were never really mentioned. And it's kind of a bummer because this was supposed to be a kind of all-in-one device except for obviously phone and texting kind of stuff, but it had a web browser, it had all those features on it, had email, calendar, everything was included in this little guy, but it just wasn't. Mainly people used it for games, you know. I never really watched Netflix on it at the time because during that time I would prefer to use my phone or watch Netflix on my PlayStation 3 or the PS4 since that was a thing coming around in 2013. While they had all those features available, I just don't think too many people were actually using them. But you can prove me wrong. You can go ahead and say, yeah, Rudy, I totally watched, you know, the Sly Cooper animated show on the Vita that they had put out, if you guys knew about that. But yeah, let me know down in the comments, guys, if you ever used your Vita for anything more than gaming. Yes, anything more than gaming. Music, videos, web browsing, all that stuff. If you actually use the MP3 player feature, I would love to know what your experience was like, and if you somehow still use that feature, let me know. I will see you guys in the next video. Make sure to like this video. Subscribe to my channel for more retro gaming and retro tech content. I will see you in the next one. Take it easy, guys. Bye-bye.